Yes.
Okay, welcome everybody. Calling to order the school board meeting of the Tuckahoe School District for Tuesday, August 9th at 6:30, and we will start with the pledge to flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So go down the row here of directors that are here. I'm Dave Larson, director from District 5,
Edna Morris, District 4.
and Director Hoover.
Hello, Curly Hoover, Director of District 1.
And
Jan Buller, District 2.
we'll get to the student rep when they're sworn in shortly. So Director Hoover is joining us virtually and as well as others. So welcome to everybody here in the boardroom, as well as those that are joining us virtually for this meeting. I want to start with some agreements that we as the board take into account when we're having our meetings. These are taken from the Courageous Conversations book. It's stay engaged, experience discomfort, be vulnerable, speak your truth, expect and accept non-closure. And for our land acknowledgement, we in the Tuckahoe School District acknowledge that the land where we teach, collaborate, learn, and play is the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish and Muckleshoot people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish and Muckleshoot tribes. As a public school district, we have a responsibility for the stewardship of this land, and we recognize the Duwamish and Muckleshoot people who have been living and working here since time immemorial. So I need a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
So much. Second.
Approved and seconded that the agenda for this evening be approved. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. The agenda is approved. So we'll go right into public comment. We will have. Pardon me? Oh, sorry. I'm looking at the wrong. Oh, yeah, right. All right, so we have, fortunately, a new student representative. So in our board, we have two student representatives at a time. One's a senior and one's a junior. And so fortunately, we have a student that was selected by interview with company. Did we have two that applied and was selected? And so Ms. Nguyen is going to be sworn in as student representative tonight by Dr. Herndon.
Great. Thank you all. I really appreciate this opportunity to swear in our second student representative. So I'll go through this and I provided you the copy there. So I'll start some of it and then if we could just repeat after me. So I state your name.
I, Dennis Ballard,
Do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States
do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States
and the Constitution and laws of the state of Washington.
and the Constitution and laws of the state of Washington,
I will, to the best of my judgment, skill, and ability,
and will to the best of my judgment, skill, and ability,
truly, faithfully, diligently, and impartially
truly, faithfully, diligently, and impartially
perform the duties of the office
perform the duties of the office
of Tukwila School District Student Representative
to the Public School District Student Representative
to the Board of Directors
to the Board of Directors
in and for King County, Washington,
in and for King County, Washington.
as such duties are prescribed by law and policy.
Such duties are prescribed by law and policy.
Congratulations, that's one very long sentence.
That's your first assignment. Rewrite that.
All right.
Welcome.
And a purple pen. Thank you.
Welcome, Dennis.
Yes.
Welcome, and we're fairly informal on the board here where when we're talking about things, so if you have a question or a comment at any time, you know, you can just, and if you want to raise your hand or whatever, and try to recognize you, otherwise just find a spot to chime in and question or comment. Obviously, when you first start, there's probably going to be lots of questions, particularly when we start talking, get into some of the acronyms that, you know, we use and so forth. And so feel free to, you know, ask for clarification on the acronyms, because that's the only way you understand kind of what's going on here. We try and talk and use as few acronyms as possible, but it's not always successful. So feel free to ask questions as things come up. So with that, we'll start with public comment. I was looking at the wrong agenda for another meeting. So the way we do public comment is we have 2 periods for public comment, once at the beginning of the meeting and once at the end of the meeting. You can also do public comment in person. You can also do it virtually. Anybody who wants to do it virtually can raise their hand or put a note in the chat and we'll get to you. But we'll start with the folks that are here in the room, and I'm probably not going to read this correctly. Is it Marie or
Me.
Meg? So do you want to? You can come to the table if you like. You can stand where you want, sit where you are, whatever you like. Yeah, go ahead.
My name is May Lilly, and I'm currently a refugee. As a female member of the LGBT community and a student and sexual assault survivor, topic of sexual assault and sexual harassment. I've been catcalled, followed, touched, and grabbed in our school hallways. These occurrences have appeared and competed on my mental health and greatly impacted my life. Coming to school to learn and being threatened with violence is a great issue that has brought much. The school here doesn't feel safe anymore and has become an unhealthy room. I'm here today to ask for your help in changing that fact by establishing an official Title IX task force, as it would make our school a safe place for students and staff. What that would look like is a diverse group of parents and students that know the challenges students facing, who actively address and remove said challenges while including prevention, as well as people who pass on application and receive and understand. As an official, look forward to becoming an official member of the task force.
Can you repeat? You said establish a. Did you say Title IX task force? Okay. Great, thank you very much for your comments. I have a little trouble reading. Is it the Shika? Pasika? Yeah, please.
My name is Rasika Kispan. I'm currently a rising female as a female student of color. The topic of sexual harassment and sexual assault is deeply concerning. The first time I heard about sexual assault was when what can be starting our sexual harassment on the day of the as I got to hear many students' stories of how they have been harassed, I started to get scared. Scared that something happened to me. From the on, I don't feel safe as students. How can students focus on their education when they are too busy worrying about their safety? So today, I ask you to form an official Title IX by working with a diverse group of people who have experience with Title IX and who know about the challenges students are facing, who would receive and understand training before becoming an official member of the task force. Making this happen will provide students with greater access to a safe learning environment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Conley, reading for a student who wasn't, for somebody who's not here, I assume?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I'm reading for Austin Mapatia. My name is Austin Mapatia. I am currently a rising junior as a member of the LGBTQ community and a victim of sexual assault. The topic of sexual assault and sexual harassment has a great impact on me. Title IX should be enforced in our learning environment so scholars know that they can get their education in a safe environment. 1 out of 10 students experience sexual harassment in school. 56% of girls have been sexually harassed. 40% of boys have been sexually harassed. There are roughly 830 scholars at Boston, and by these percentages, there are essentially many scholars who have been sexually harassed or sexually assaulted during school hours. Take into consideration the Title IX could be our gateway into having a more trusting and accountability in our school. We scholars do not have that yet with Boston, so I hope that you listen to us and help. Listen to us, you will decide to help.
Thank you.
If they can turn in the written statements, I'm getting texts that it was hard to get a comment. And I want to make sure I have it
Yeah,
correct.
if you have, yeah, written statements, that would be helpful. That way I'll get into formal meeting minutes accurately. And that would be great. Can I just ask you, so you are all students at Foster High School, right? Have you, met with the principal on this subject? Mr. Blanton?
Yeah. With the meetings. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and if you can always meet with Dr. Herndon on it as well, because it's obviously a very important subject, so want to make sure that, you know, we get heard and, you know, we can address this as much as possible. So encourage you to keep advocating for it. Thank you. Do we have anybody online?
Chat. I see nothing's raised.
Okay. Then we'll move on to the race and equity report. Dr.
Great, thank you. A few areas around the race and equity report. I really appreciate the public comments around task force and Title IX. I believe that's a area that we're going to discuss a little bit later anyway, which is good. But to me, I see that as one of our equity issues that we should definitely be taking a look at, forming a task force, figuring out good proactive strategies and ways to respond to reporting. So we want to make sure we're as consistent as possible. On the other side, on the race pieces, I met recently with Puget Sound ESD, and for our 3rd year of work with the Puget Sound Educational Service District, we're looking at 3 particular areas of problematic design. One is working with the leadership team, which is working with site-based leaders and central office leaders, and looking at our strategic plan, looking how they can support us in our leadership efforts, as well as our equity tool implementation. Looking at that, that's a quarterly design where we'll be meeting 4 times a year. We haven't established those dates yet. The other area for this particular partnership is looking at the district equity leads. Each building has a district equity, race and equity committee, and there are leads for each one of those committees. So part of this is to bring those folks together and have the Puget Sound ESD work with the district equity leads as well. Those would be on a monthly basis, coaching basis, and professional learning support. And then the third is the executive leadership planning and feedback sessions. Again, that's a monthly meeting aligned with the strategic plan, where we're looking at growth within leadership and development across the district. So that's in conjunction with the plan that we've been working with the board, Eileen Machina and Amy Cass from WASDA. So we've got that at the board level, and then continued partnerships working with leaders and administrators throughout the district for this year. We worked with some of these folks last year. One of them is Dr. Chris Knaus and Rochelle Bard, who's out of Oakland, California. So the two of them have been working with us last year. They work with both principals as well as a few students. So we're looking forward to that continued partnership as we look forward. And again, looking at how we incorporate this into our strategic plan has been an important part of the conversation about how we interweave this into pretty much everything that we're trying to do moving forward. So I'm looking forward to those sessions and seeing what the outcome is going to be, all for the betterment of our staff and students in our community. That's what I have on that. Well, I will say the other piece is we are looking to do the hiring. I know we had posted for our race and equity TOSA. That was posted in June. We've had some transitions just been trying to get that identified. We have a few folks who have applied for the position, so we'll be interviewing for that in the next couple of weeks, definitely in place before school starts. And then that person will work in conjunction with the race and equity professional development coordinator as well. So identifying that person also, and we want both of those in place before the school year starts. And those two people will also be included in the work we're doing to be telling. They're not called out in this particular plan, but I see both of those folks as both district equity leads or leadership team leads.
So the leadership teams are in the buildings. The equity team lead, is that a person out of that leadership team that then comes to a district? Why?
Yeah, so the there is a district, there is a lead for each building on the race and equity teams.
Okay.
So yeah,
That's
we're
what that-
working both with the teams and.
Okay. Okay.
So that's what I have for that particular.
I was just thinking about, oh. Is it okay? Can I jump in? Okay,
No.
just excited about kind of these three opportunities with PSESD. And I know we've talked a little bit about our desire to have kind of like some follow-up around like what the implementation from these professional development opportunities or coaching opportunities looks like. So I think it'd be really cool to, whether it was every other month, but add a component of like an update around the PSESD work, like really specifically around each of these components, and of course how it is aligning with the strategic plan work.
Yes, and I think in the future, the plan is also to just not have me do these reports. We have other people from the teams do some of these race and equity updates. So that's the thought moving forward.
Other questions on race and equity? Okay, move on to the COVID-19 report.
Sure, COVID-19. So we did recently get some updates from OSPI and King County Department of Health. We're currently working through what those updates are going to look like to the beginning of the school year. And then have some communications that go out with that. Just that at first glance, they don't look remarkably different than what we saw at the end of the school year. So I don't think there's been a lot of changes in that, but I just want to make sure that we have picked up on any of the nuances or changes, and if there are any changes, obviously, that happen before the school year actually starts. So we should be communicating out initially what those updates to COVID protocols, COVID-19 protocols might be. Probably in the next week or two, and then again within the week before school starts, just as an update. So we'll have all that information both on our website. We'll send that out to students and families in our languages as well. And then when it's on our website, it's able to be translated in more than the languages that we can translate and send out directly. So that's one particular area of COVID-19. The other is we do have an upcoming vaccination clinic available August 17th, I believe. And I think we have that up on our website. That's available not only for COVID-19 vaccines and boosters, but any other required vaccinations for students or staff to be in attendance on campus. So I think that's a really great opportunity. The last one we had, which was July 27th, we had over 100 people attend, and it'll get some vaccines. So the provider that we have is able to provide vaccinations for children under 5, if that's what some of the people coming in are wanting. Obviously, they're not coming in by themselves, but if an adult is bringing them in, it's available for young people under 5.
I'm wondering if there's a way to reach out directly to the new enrollees, especially coming from different countries that may not have the same requirements. If there's a way to tap into those.
We do have district registration happening on the 17th, and the vaccination clinic is also available at that same time. But yeah, if there's someone new who's coming in, we can make them available. Obviously, if they're registering after that, we wouldn't know that they're coming in for registration.
Right.
Yeah. So just good opportunities out there. We just want to make sure people are made aware, and we want to continue to partner and offer the opportunities moving forward as well.
Could we have some flyers to hand out at the food pantry? Is that something that, okay,
Yeah, we can,
that'd be great. Thank you.
Any other questions on COVID-19?
I've got one. I didn't have the opportunity to look really in detail at the plan, like the updates, but did notice that required was bolded around case notifications and for both schools and after school programs. And last year, of course, this was really difficult for us. I know that we put a few positions, added a few positions to support that. Even then, I think at that point, case transmission was lower, and we're going into a school year where case transmission is really high. And so kind of what's going to be different this year, considering that transmission rate. And then I know we're kind of asked for a really detailed plan, particularly I know it's incorporated to some degree in the communication plan, but I really think there would be some value in really outlining the roles, specifically when there is a positive case of COVID, to ensure that we are meeting that requirement more efficiently and consistently than we did last year.
Yeah, again, I think the health team will be able to review those updated requirements and see what's going to be the most effective and efficient way to get that information out. So that should be coming. I think we have that identified coming up for the next meeting for sure. But we'll, as soon as we have that plan developed, we'll get it out to board directors so you can see that and then communicate that out to the rest of the staff and community.
Any other questions? Okay, so move on to the consent agenda. So need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Consent agenda is approved. Now move into board discussion items. The first one is the 22-23 budget review. So you want to start us off, Ms. Birdsong?
Yes, good evening, everyone. And so our deadline is closely approaching. We have a lot of moving factors for the upcoming 22-23 school year. One of the main factors is that we are in a bargaining year with our EA and ESP group, which is contingent on many different things that have different potentials when it comes to increases in expenditures, workload, things of that nature. And so when I am working on building my budget, I have to have inflators in there to kind of earmark money for just in case things happen, because what we don't want to do is have a budget and then have to do an extension because something was not earmarked properly. Not saying a budget extension is a bad thing, but it's one less process that we want to avoid. And so again, the budget for 22-23 school year is still a work in progress. Before I open the floor for questions, I did want to let everybody know that I am still holding the community budget forums. The first one is this Thursday, August 11th from 7 to 7:45. And then next Wednesday, August 17th from 6:30 to 7:15. So now I open the floor if you guys have any questions.
Do you have questions? Go ahead, Don.
For lunches. Are you thinking of keeping it free like last year, or are you moving back to a certain state?
Yes, lunch will be free to everybody. For pretty much until the state no longer mandates it. There was a switch in our food service program. We are now under the CEP, which is the community eligibility provision, and due to our free and reduced lunch rates, we were mandated by the state to now move to this new program, which is free for everyone. Great question.
Yeah, there'll be free lunches and breakfast in this district for the foreseeable future. And because the state requires that we do that, so they don't unfortunately completely pay for it all, but it will be that way, so. Okay, so the first question I have is related to the, so we're gonna get some increase in staffing for elementary support staff, that is counselors, social workers, psychologists, and nurses. The state is funding an increase of about 0.5 FTE for next year, and then 0.5 for the following year, 0.5 for the next year. And the question that I have is, apparently we haven't kind of decided how we're gonna, what positions we're gonna use that money for as yet. And I guess that concerns me a little bit because, you know, we're kind of starting the school year in a month, and we're gonna need to get those positions. And it also is kind of an opportunity for, because the state is phasing this in over 3 years. We can use ESSER dollars, these are money that we're getting from the federal government. That's gonna run out in 2 years to kind of preload some of those potentially. And so I guess I just wanna, it's more of a comment that hopefully we can, you know, get that sorted out soon. I know there's the need for, you know, more of the social emotional support systems at our elementary schools in particular. And so, you know, that's just a kind of a comment. Hopefully we can figure that out sooner rather than later, so we can have those, whatever that's decided upon at the start of the year. I was curious a little bit about the current projected ending fund balance. Indicated that, yeah, I mean, it's true, we don't know exactly what it's going to be until it's done, but what is your current estimate the 6%, or is it? I saw 4.4% in there, as well as on the financial forecast sheet that you give us, you know, every month or something. I saw last time it was 6. I'm just curious, are we? The goal, obviously, by our policy is always to try and get to the 6th level.
Yeah.
And I understand you don't have the absolute number, but does it look like we're on track to get the 6, or?
So that one, again, it's kind of a moving
Yeah,
target, right? So you have your projected
Right.
monthly, and you look at historical data, and then you enter the actual for that month, which then changes your
right,
forecasted calculation. As of June, it's looking at 4.4%, but that doesn't mean that it will not change once
Yeah,
July is reconciled and then August, because again, we're closing purchase orders, we're paying stuff down, or we're not paying stuff down because
Right.
things did not happen. So there's a lot of moving pieces, as everybody's aware. We live in the month of August for about a month and a half.
oh, yeah,
And so there's a lot of things that we're working between 2 years, and so I would rather state what I know now
Mhm.
versus just guessing for the future. And so based on that, the numbers will fluctuate, it will change. But as of now, that's kind of where we stand, but again, it will change. Next time you see it, so hopefully in the right direction, that's the goal.
Okay. So I was looking at the, we had the Berg group do our arts, look at our arts program and they came back with some recommendations, which are just that, recommendations. I mean, I'm just curious as to where, we are in the process, because part of their recommendations was, for example, to add 2 more elementary arts staff, which obviously that has budgetary implications. And so, but they had other recommendations in there as well. I'm just wondering, where are we in the process of kind of taking a look at that study and then deciding how we might want to implement it? Maybe we may want to implement it over multiple years, there's a variety of things. I'm just curious as to, I think at one point in one of the community things, you indicated that we were going to fund 1 theater specialist that would be split between Foster and Showalter out of ESSER dollars, which, of course, ESSER dollars being temporary dollars means that at the end of 2 years, then, what do we do? So I'm just curious about where we are in the process of evaluating the recommendations from the arts report in terms of, and then how it's going to implement or how it's going to affect the budget.
Perfect, thank you. I believe the last document that I saw was the recommendation that was done by all of the involved parties, which had year 1 with the theater specialist. Year 2, I believe, is when I wanted to start implementing the art teachers at the elementary school. So it's part of, I want to say it's a 3-year plan. I cannot visually see what was recommended for year 3, but year 1 was the theater specialist, which we're doing, and year 2 was the implementation of the art staff of elementary school.
So the thinking, I mean, anytime you put a staff into ESSER dollars, you immediately said in 2 years, then what was 2? So it becomes not sustainable. So is the thinking that then we're going to review that position?
Absolutely, we want to see what the impact is of implementing, what was the impact of having the theater specialist? What is the impact of having more arts available to our young leaders, right? So after having the staff, we want to do a review, see what the impact was, and then, as I've mentioned before, make that decision if we want to do zero-based budgeting, where we put our priorities first, and then we start phasing out what has not been working for the district.
Okay, I hope that, the theater person in the past, I believe, was like a part-time theater and part-time English language arts staff at Foster High School. And theater is one of those things that it's like a lot of things, I think, in education that I've observed it. If you get a great leader in that position, the students will come and it'll be a great program. So, yeah, I hate to see that program discontinued. Yeah, because we haven't found the right person to lead it. So I understand we've been iterating through. We got another new person for this year. So anyway, I hope we're able to hang on to that program. The last question I had was, well, okay. First thing is, I would like to see the 3-year plan. But I mean, we've seen now the recommendations from the Berg group, but I'd like to see, okay, what as a district, what did we decide to do with that the 3-year plan you're referencing, so we can keep track of that. And the last thing, I think it comes up, actually it's going to come up in the communications discussion as well, but so the legislature passed a law last year called language access, which is going to require districts to, in particular, our district to have I think the wording is either a full-time language access person or report the number of hours that were spent doing language access tasks. by 22-23. So I guess I just want to alert folks that, and when I was looking at the bill, the legislature, of course, uses their favorite term, do this out of existing funds, which means translated into unfunded mandate. So that translates into. So, and we've got, I think, a year, that requirements didn't start till the 23-24 school year. So we've got a year to kind of figure out how we're going to meet some of these. They're going to impose some requirements about language access, which for this district obviously is important because we have a variety of different languages, but we're going to need to figure out how we're going to do that within existing. I put it on my list to go get in our legislators' ear about, okay, that's nice, we had to do that, now you have to provide the dollars to do that. But anyway, I just put that out there as a kind of a heads up, because I know, our communication director is going to be talking about that issue as well, so. And just one last comment, I guess I'm getting a little nervous about, there's a lot of things in the budget that are, kind of yet to be filled in, which is making me nervous because we're getting down to the wire. And at the end of August, we're not going to really have a choice. We're not going to really have time to respond. I think it's great you're going out and getting some more input into it, but I guess just for future, it would really be good to be a little bit more ahead of the curve on this one, because otherwise we're going to be up against the wall and not be able to make some changes. So anyway, that's all I got. Thank you for your work on this. Any other comments on this? Then we'll move on to the board calendar for 22-23. I don't know, Director Hoover, did you have something in mind on this particular discussion item? Or maybe Dr.
No, not specifically. I couldn't,
Okay.
Dr. Hernan, was this my discussion item that I put on here?
Okay,
Yeah, I think this was, just kind of shows what the calendar and cadence looks like. I know there are a couple of items that have been in discussion with board members about whether or not, we're looking at just doing the Saturday meetings quarterly rather than monthly. I think there's a couple of items that we still need to work through amongst board members. And then also some of the structures, but in the work session, we talked about how, just for the audience and other people who are attending, for the calendar that you're looking at or seeing online, the first board meeting of each month generally has a work session that starts at 5 o'clock. And so that goes from 5 to 6. And we talked about outlining what those topics might be for the upcoming school years that relate to our strategic plan. So I'll be working on putting that together for board members so that we can look and see how we make our strategic plan more of a living document. And we are incorporating other reports and data into those work sessions as we go throughout the year. But other than that, this particular calendar just is kind of outlining those pieces. I think just so that we all know and have these dates on our calendar. Usually we're not moving the Tuesdays. Those are pretty consistent. In the past, it's really been the Saturdays that have kind of flexed more than anything else. But the highlight on these, I'm glad that we'll be back to doing, as far as I know, doing one of the board meetings at each one of the schools starting in January. So that's something that had been done pre-COVID. And so you can see the kind of agenda there. There's one in January, February, March, April, May. Each school has that opportunity to host the board. And generally what happens is the principal or leadership team kind of have a presentation about their school. Sometimes it involves staff or students. So we'll give the principals enough times and show them the schedule so that they know and can think about the presentations they might have as they relate to items that we're covering on that particular board. So that was the only item for this that I had. I didn't know if there was anything else.
Yeah, I think it's good to keep the Saturday meetings there, and just to reserve, you know. If we don't, if there isn't the work to be done, then we'll cancel them, but it's good to have them there.
I was also, yeah, thinking, would it be useful to add our board retreat or a potential board retreat? I know we're hoping to have our 5th board member to do that. And at the same time, I want to be mindful that we don't just keep putting off pretty critical work. So would it be useful to maybe pencil it in for October, November?
Yeah, I'm open either one of those dates. I think we can, I can also check with the 2 folks who helped facilitate those in the past and see if they're available either of those dates. Since we have them.
And then perhaps like extend just a little bit.
Sure.
Because we had originally kind of talked about trying to do, you know, more lengthy or a 2-day time together.
This one, I could just put in another plug for those in the room and online who may not be aware. We're missing 1 board member from District 3, and we're looking for applications. Anybody who lives within the boundary of District 3, which is generally the part of town around Showalter and Foster High School, kind of going north and a little bit south. We need somebody from that area to be on the board. If anybody there is interested, you can contact our district office, or you can contact any board member if you're interested in figuring out what the workload and what the job is about. But we're definitely, this is one of those jobs that I guess open until filled at the term.
Yeah, technically, it's now moved to the ESD. Because for the last several months, we didn't have an application, and we're going through the process according to state law after the census of redrawing district boundaries. So we're having that process happen as well.
What if you live outside the district?
Currently, the requirements are you have to live within District 3, within the district represented area. But again, going through this boundary redraw, that may shift a little bit. In the future, there has been some talk about possibly at large, but that's something that has to take place on a ballot. So we can't just all of a sudden do that. And these boundary changes have to be done by November 15th. So there's a little bit of a timeline associated with that. So we're currently in the process. We're figuring out what these boundary lines are going to look like. And then that might be helpful too, because it might shift a little bit, a couple blocks one way or another. There are at least 2 districts. I think it's 5 and 4 that need to alter. But I'm not 100% sure and don't know what the new, we are engaged with a company that does these boundary redraws. And so I haven't seen a mock-up yet of what the new areas might look like, but that might be instructive for people who are interested, because they now might be a part of district.
So yeah, the only actual requirement to be on board is you have to be a registered voter within the boundaries of the district that we're talking about, which is District 3. So. Okay.
So by adding the board retreat,
You could probably asterisk the October and November, and then I'll see the availability of Ms. Cass and Ms. Issue.
So the next item is task force and committees. So yeah, and I'm not Dr. Herndon or.
Sure, I'm happy to. I know we've talked a little bit about this, and I think President Hoover wanted to address this as well. I know she had a couple of thoughts around this, but I think part of this is just thoughts about, I know, passions or directions that some board directors might have and how they might correlate to future tasks.
Yeah, and in terms of, I mean, we've had for 5 years budget advisory committee, we have, I think, CTE, which is to have community members in there. We've had at various times technology advisory committee, so we have some of them. And Director Hoover, did you have thoughts on some others?
Yeah, so as everyone is aware, I've been doing some work with students and some staff around gender inclusive practices and ultimately like a sense of belonging and inclusiveness at school and safety at school. And then, of course, as we all heard, some of the incredible voices of some of our students and public comment, really there's a need to get I think a really deep understanding about what is really going on and get some recommendations from our community. This was something that I actually didn't really know was an official thing that we could kind of, create, and with hopes of, I think just really potentially moving this work along in a different way. And so just kind of wanted to bring this forward and start the discussion in hopes of putting together basically, I don't know how to go about this process. And so bringing it to the space to really kind of talk about what the next steps would be, with hopes of also moving it along somewhat quickly, to do it, of course, thoroughly and well, with a lot of thoughtfulness, but with some action, because our students need it.
Yeah, I guess for me reading it, I mean, it just requires somebody to bring forward a proposal for a committee that they would want to set up, and the guidelines and the procedure describe kind of what you need to do to do that. So I can see that's all we need.
Yeah, I'd be happy to work with President Hoover on that. I know she's got some ideas, and then we can make sure that the entire board is in agreement with which committees or task force we want to set up, and then we can get moving on that.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of the hope of what this discussion would be, is what that task force might be, so that we could start kind of drafting that. And I really appreciate you being willing to partner with me on that, Dr. Herndon.
Yeah, I would like.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think we've got to start on the gender inclusive one. We've heard a call out for a Title IX, which is great. And I think I've explored the idea of the Stay in School task force. And so there's three that might be a good start. I don't know what anybody else might have in mind, but they think, there could be an enrollment task force. Somebody, group that's talking about, what do we need to do around enrollment in this district? So I'm really willing to take one of those on.
Okay, so it sounds like there's some
Yeah.
proposals.
So I think what I'm
Go right
I'm sorry, I was gonna say what I'm going to propose then is essentially my goal will be to work with Dr. Herndon and bring forward a proposal to address or essentially look at both gender and Title IX together. And I think they're very connected. And so I think that scope will then potentially lead to another task force to dive deeper into kind of what that might look like. So that's what I'm going to propose and bring back to the board, hopefully soon. Is everybody okay with that?
Yep, sounds good.
Awesome.
Okay, if there's nothing else on this subject, we'll move on to the questions only presentations. So these are presentations that the board has received in advance, and had the opportunity to ask some of the questions, and we now have the opportunity to kind of delve a little deeper into any of the questions in more depth. So just kind of go through them. Anybody have any questions on the communication plan from our Communication director.
I would just like to have a comment that she's done a remarkable job in the short amount of time that she's been here. So thank you.
I guess my only kind of question was around this. I hope, are you aware of this language access bill I was kind of referring to earlier?
I was alive, I hadn't heard about it.
Okay, I can, actually, I'll send you some of the details, because I think you've referenced it in your communication plan, I think, the translation. Is it? Communications. Oh, yeah, translation, how to effectively communicate with our multilingual parents. That's exactly what the language access bill is about. So, and what the state is gonna do, they're setting up they've already set up a task force to kind of give guidelines to districts for how to do this. So it would be good for us, just link up that as you're thinking about that. And then, because like I said, in a year, it's gonna be kind of a requirement, more honest requirement. And so if we're kind of ready for it, then that would be great. So it's great to see that, you've already started thinking about that and it feeds right into that. So that was just kind of a heads up on that one. Any other comments, questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Also, just more of a comment. I just want to also a second of what Director Moore said. And just thank you so much, Ms. Martin, for the work that you've done. It's just really appreciated seeing your plan and just the way that you outline those roles in that way. I think that's going to be really, really useful. So just really appreciate your thoughtfulness and thinking about kind of short-term actionable things and some long-term goals. One question I did have, and I'm so sorry if it was addressed in there, but I don't think so. Have you, kind of where you at with identifying those communication liaisons, and do you anticipate there being any reason those folks won't be in place by the start of the school year?
No, so I've talked to all the, can you hear me? Okay, or do you want me to come up here? Is it better?
I can hear you fine.
So I have talked to all the principals about this, so everybody has at least candidates that they're thinking about putting in these positions or asking to do it in every building, except for Thorndike. So because Thorndike is not a principal, that's kind of up in the air, although I did have a teacher express interest, so I might reach out to her directly, if that's okay. So I think we should have everybody in place and hoping by the first day of school. So I'll check out with the principal, and then hopefully we can kind of start meeting and then getting the school to communicate about consistently.
I guess I did have one other comment too. So one of your goals was to help increase enrollment in the district. And so I was curious about the benchmark measure you're looking for that. And I don't know, what I would suggest, if I'm not figuring out the percentage of federal residents that are 18 and either enrollment. What I had kind of more in mind was just simple, that's a very simple one, what is our enrollment today? And then look at it going forward. And it seemed like it'd be like, but that's really all we're trying to do is, and the question in terms of specifics, there's a couple ways of measuring students, FTE students and actual just bodies. And I would use FTE, but in the elementary schools, it's the same thing, basically. But anyway, that's, I would suggest just making it simple, just say, okay, here's where we are today, and then kind of follow it. I mean, obviously, communication is one aspect of increasing enrollment. It's not gonna be the whole thing, but anyway, it's great that you set that out as a goal, because I think it could be part of our total strategy to improve enrollment. So that's just a suggestion.
And yeah, I think that makes sense. I ever wanted to disassociate it from pure numbers.
Yeah.
Because the population of people declines. I mean.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, we can't control that. And so if
Yeah.
it's pure numbers, I think one percentage, but that's similar.
Yeah, I think obviously was increasing. So, I mean, the school district is, I don't know, but the city is going the other way. So, but it just kind of maybe it's oversimplifying, but it's just a simple way of saying, okay, here's where we are today, and we're gonna try and increase. But Okay, any other comments on communication? No, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Hope you feel better.
Next item, board policies 2161 and 3246. Which look like they're related to special education. This is a first read of these policies, so it's just kind of making them consistent with recent changes in the law. You know, I don't know, is there any, do you have anything you want to add particularly to it, or?
I appreciated that you went back through and tried to tag it with the law. I didn't get a chance to really look at it today, but I appreciate that you did that. Because it does help us to know what actually changed. I do still have the question about why we have two schools that are using recess as discipline. Was that in this? No, that was in
That was the
the
discipline one.
Never mind, wrong report. I spent the day at Wildwood, so I'm a little bit worn out. No, that was on, your stuff was good. Thank you.
Any other comments on this one? Pretty straightforward, so. Okay, thank you very much. The next one, early withdrawal report. I don't know, do we have any additional questions on that one?
It's really hard to know what's going on, because we just don't have a lot of information on a lot of the students that are not here. And I don't know how we would get that. But it's really hard to work from the lack of knowledge if there's something going on that makes them leave, or if it's the price of housing, or if it's the jobs, you know, all of those things tell a different story. So I wish we had more information, because I'm not sure the numbers tell us what we would need to know to respond.
Yeah, one of the questions I had was, okay, so if students transferred out to another district, the question is kind of, did they move there?
Yeah.
Or did
right.
they just decide to stay where they are and transfer to another, which apparently we don't have the ability to catch up, because those are two different. I was a little bit interested in the racial breakdown, the disproportionalities in terms of, but yeah, like I say, it's a little hard. I'm not sure how much I should make of this, but Hispanics had a higher transfer, disproportionately higher transfer rate, which one could envision if we had a dual language program in Spanish, maybe that would help there. I don't know. But yeah, this is a little bit,
This kind of goes back to the book you were reading, the street data
yeah,
thing, how what's missing here is the anecdotal
yeah, right,
information.
right.
This is just data.
right.
Yeah, I just want to second that. I completely agree. I was sharing that. Oh, I'm feeding back a lot. I'm not sure if that's just on my end or y'all's end too. Okay.
That's good on our end.
Okay. Yeah, I think I was hoping for a little bit more of a comprehensive report, but then I guess I understand that there's not a system in place. So I guess my biggest question is, what is going to be the strategy? How are we going to put something in place where we can really start to actually get some information that we can learn from and do something with? And you know, it was a little bit disappointing, I think, to get a response that just said our hope is to continue having a conversation so we can determine a strategy. We're having we've been having the conversation while we've watched our enrollment decline. So what is the strategy?
So, and I think, you know, it's like a lot of these things, it's going to be a multifaceted strategy. And, you know, we talked a little about distributed communications could be part of it. Dual language could be part of it. You know, there's a variety of, but it would be nice to have that kind of articulated out. Here are some things that were, I mean, CPE is part of it. So,
Communication,
there's, pardon me?
communication.
Well, that, yeah, start with communication, dual language, CPE, but, you know, it'd be nice to have them all just kind of laid out in front of us, so
I think we also have some assets out there that we don't tap into. I think our teachers often know, our principals often know why a kid has left, and maybe it didn't make the data exchange because that no one requested records or whatever, but you know, teachers know when a kid moves lots of times, and we don't have a way of really tapping into that, collecting that information. Good point.
I don't know, if I've heard any of those thoughts could be
Yeah, enrollments, you know,
implemented.
multiple things that they're taking a look at, programs as well. One of the pieces I was trying to take a look at is the number of students who opt out. We do know that. People who are Teckola residents who transfer out.
Yeah.
That's for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's because there could be childcare located closer to the adults' work. And so they go to schools where the childcare is closer to work, even though they live in Teckola. So part of that to me is looking at those trends. The other is, you know, I think if you look at the enrollment decreases just throughout, the community, most districts are down. And probably a lot of that has to do with cost of living in the county. So to me, it's looking at what are the trends that are different within Teckola compared to some of the other districts around us. That probably tells us quite a bit as well. And then just, yeah, trying to work in a system, maybe getting feedback when students or families request that transfer out as part of that process. So in some cases, they may answer, in other cases, they may not. All I think things that we can look forward to putting in there, so maybe give us some additional insight.
So it sounds like we actually do have, as if you say, yeah, if they do have to request a transfer out.
We do know that.
Yeah, so that says we don't have, but we actually do. So that would be information, yeah, like similar to gathering information when, you know, teachers leave, you know, why are we, you know, that kind of information is helpful because if there's some things in there, sometimes there's nothing we can do about it. But sometimes there's tidbits in there that we can actually do something about, so.
Well, and then, to me, this feels like a real cultural shift. Data doesn't always have to come from the CTE data and technology department or services. It's a bigger conversation than that, and if we're funneling everything down to that department, I think we're actually losing a lot of conversation. So how do we open that up? It takes more work to do that. It's easier just to look at the numbers, but I think in the conversation, we get more information.
You might need a little task force.
Hey,
You're the one who suggested the enrollment task force, I mean,
yeah,
yeah, and that's exactly what,
yeah,
something that is,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, this is Mr. Baker. I'd be more than happy to be part of a task force on this for sure.
cool.
Okay, any other thoughts on,
And here, I think student voice would be really beneficial to have.
Yep.
okay, no other thoughts on that one, the next one is AA degrees. So these are students that they graduate from high school at the same time get their Associate of Arts degrees. I think we've had, let's see, the report was that there was 9 this year, last year we had 18, but I think Mr. Baker reported there's still some colleges that haven't reported back to us yet, so presumably, do you have any idea, Mr. Baker, when that would? So presumably the number is actually bigger than 9?
Yes, when the counselors return from summer break, they should have
Okay.
that information at Foster High School.
Just looking back through the history that I've kept, we've had as many as, I think 1 year before COVID, there was like 30 students that got AA degrees, so, which is pretty impressive. Also saves them a lot of money. Okay, if there's no other questions on, that one, the quarterly grants update. Do you have any questions on that one?
I appreciated the two new columns.
I did have two.
You're breaking up, Director Hoover. Did you have?
I was so delayed. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
Okay.
interrupt you. I was very delayed.
Go ahead.
We'll see if it lets me. My internet's. I think, okay. Oh my gosh. Well, now I just got flustered and I lost my train of thought. So Director Bolajak, please go ahead. I'm going to turn on my hotspot so that won't happen again. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Carly. It's really hard when one of us is virtual like this. I was just thanking who did this report?
Ms. Birdsong.
Thank you, Ms. Birdsong, for adding these two columns. My question had been about the duration of the grants and where we were in the process of spending. So I guess I just have one follow-up. If it says annual, I understand that's a one-year grant. Are they renewed or are most of these just 1 year and done?
They're renewed
They're,
for the most part, yes, the ones that are
Okay.
annual, so depending on our free and reduced rate will dictate the next year's allocation.
okay,
Fed lab.
and then if do we lose it if we don't spend it by the end of the year?
It depends on.
Depends on,
the
okay.
grant. A lot of them are 10% or 100%, which usually is either 0, 10, or 100.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, so I was looking down, so the ones that are 100%, fine, we can carry those over.
If
The one-
anything's left on the table.
Uh,
If anything left on the table, so I think like Title I, the might say like 100% carryover, but we.
Yeah. So the one I was concerned about was the LAP high poverty, which says we have 388,000 remaining, but only 10% carryover. So that one was money sitting on the table.
Yes, I'm doing some very creative, shaping.
Okay, good.
Allowable.
Yeah.
Allowable.
Yeah,
Completely legal, but yeah.
absolutely.
I just want to make sure we aren't leaving them. Okay. Any other? Director Hoover, did you have?
Yeah, let's see if this will work again. So this kind of mirrors something that Director Larson shared earlier. But looking at like the ESSER 2 positions, just kind of like curious, kind of why we've gone so far in the direction of just funding positions that we know will ultimately be part-time, particularly when I feel like I've gotten the impression that we were looking to do something really sustainable with those. And I know that there's a lot of value certainly that can come with seeing what certain positions can do and kind of seeing the impact in those things. But I also think, we know that a social worker is going to be valuable and only just add more value to our schools and our students. So just kind of curious about why we chose to go in that direction for those positions or with that money.
Right, I'm a visual person. I did not print up the grant report, and so I do not see. You're specifically referring to ESSER 2.
ESSER 2, yeah. And in the positions box, the one, on the far right, so it's on the second page. There we go. You're right at the top there. So assistive tech, literacy specialist, instructional coach, contracted COVID nurse, contract tracer, social workers, and behavioral techs.
I'm sorry, your question is why did we go in that direction?
Yeah, I'm just curious, like kind of what drove the decision to go with some of the positions. Yeah.
I believe with the ESSER 2, it was part of a collective effort. We spoke with different principals and stakeholders to kind of see what could help benefit us for the now with what was going on with ESSER, just basically the benefit of having these dollars for the next couple of years.
And I think looking at some of those contracted COVID nurse, contact tracers, those are directly related to COVID. And
Correct.
presumably we would, hopefully, we won't need those positions as COVID fades off a little bit. So some of these are strictly health related.
Well, I think the board requested some of, like additional social workers, because we felt like we were in a crisis mode.
Well, yeah, that's the other part of COVID is the mental health aspects of it, which we know it's tricky because we had a lot of mental health aspects that were unfunded before COVID, and then COVID just kind of enhanced, made it worse. And so, you know, we're still going to need more social workers, but maybe, yeah. That's going to be an interesting one when we get to the end of the to figure out exactly how many of those we're going to need and how much we can afford, actually.
So can I ask one more silly question? So when it says annual, are we talking about a school year annual or?
Yes, usually everything
Okay.
goes to fiscal year, so.
So we're,
August 31st.
all right, so if we're looking at this.
Mhm.
And you look at the safety net federal grant up at the top and 243 was granted and we haven't spent anything. Is that by the end of August or are we talking this next September through August?
So this is as of June 30th of this year, so this grant report
Okay.
ends August 31st.
So we haven't spent any of that. How come?
So,
Safety net is a reimbursement.
Yeah.
Okay,
already
thank you.
So,
Okay.
yeah, it just has not been allocated as one for one, we haven't got the dollars that they should be popping up on this apportionment, and then again, this is as of June. So,
Okay, so every one of these is gonna be different like that, isn't
It's a good thing we have.
it? Thank you.
Yeah, we've come a long way over the number of years. It's difficult to capture all these grants. There's so many of them
Yeah,
on one document, but you know, she's done a really good job and we keep
Yeah.
enhancing it to make it a little better, a little better, a little better. So it's, trust me, it's a lot better than choosing.
oh, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. If there's no other questions on the quarter plans, we'll go to the discipline data. Anybody have any questions on
This is,
Yeah.
this is the one about why are we using recess
oh, yeah, yeah,
as a
okay.
discipline?
Good.
I thought we as a board had actually acted on that at one point. Or at least had a strong conversation about that. And so is that information that just wasn't picked up by some principals? Or did we not make it a concrete thing when we talked about it?
I think it would be good to know, you know, and having some conversation with principals. Of course, two of those principals are no longer here, so we want to be able to have the conversation with them.
Right,
But certainly a conversation that we can have with principals to answer and reiterate that expression that recess really is not one of the strategies well for this one students.
and so that's something you would pass on.
Myself, that's the board chair. will have that
All
conversation.
right.
Really applicable just to the elementary.
And then the other piece was just the concern about how much data was lacking and why. Is there a bias in what gets reported and what doesn't? Why is it some not reported? Anyway,
Yeah, those are good questions also. And these two particular pieces, Swiss is one system
right,
and Skyward is another. So and they don't communicate and import data back and forth. So starting with Mr. Baker a little bit today about that and making sure that we do have data that gets reported. Ideally, I don't know if there's a mechanism for importing that data directly from Swiss into Skyward. The concern about that is when you have double entry, it also leads to the possible
right,
errors in
Right.
entering information. So, and staff aren't really excited to do double entries. So they put an entry into Swiss, they don't want to do it again later for Skyward.
right,
But it is important that we know what the data is around this pepper food. So for us, it's really about figuring out the way that we are getting complete and accurate information about that.
So I mean, this question, this issue of discipline data and Swift and Skyward seems like it's been going on for multiple years. And my understanding, listening to people, is the reason Swift was brought in is because it's more usable. I mean, so the other question around this is, okay, you put data in, it doesn't really do you good if you can't get it out in a way that's going to be meaningful to, you know, to use it. So it sounds like that problem really hasn't been solved yet. I mean, when I listened to the principals over that describe Swift over the years, it's readily usable, and by they can show it to the staff, they can make changes, you know, and so forth. So it sounds like that issue hasn't been resolved yet, which is probably, you know, at the core of this. I mean, because yeah, nobody wants to enter data twice, right? It's a pain in the butt, but if you know, if Skyward presents it in a kind of an unusable format or not really usable format, then, you know, what's the point of it? So, so it sounds like this area needs some work in terms of whether we need to consider the software, whether we need a link between the two or something.
Right. So the challenge is that Skyward is our student information
Right.
system, and that uploads the data
Right.
into the state sewer system,
Right.
which is a requirement.
Right.
So I don't believe that Swiss interacts with Sears, which is the upload to the state.
Yeah.
So we have a system that is, you know, one that students in the buildings, at least staff and principals, say, this is more usable, this is more information for us. And we have a state
Right.
requirement that requires us to have data come through the system. So it is certainly one of those challenges. We'll continue to take a look at how we get that information in. You know, I don't think we're alone in that
Yeah,
kind of
That's
disconnect.
exactly what I was gonna say.
And I've worked with Skyward in the past, their CEO, they have there. It's kind of interesting because they will develop something. But there's always a cost, and usually writing something is a massive cost. So they will only do it if there's X number of districts that
Right.
want to do that. And not every district uses Swift, some are different. And others just put the information right in the Skyward, and so again, then it gets back to, well, it's not as user friendly or robust or give us the kind of data that we're really interested in. So, you know, I think for us, making sure at least we have complete data, whatever that may be. And then we have the requirement side. Of course, we want to be as efficient with people's time and data as possible, but we also want to get the data and information that best represents how we can get better and how we get information about, you know, what is the actual impact that we're having discipline wise on our students and families. So that to me is the more important information. The requirement, the mandates, that's, we have to do that and figure that out. But for me, it's what do we do with the information that makes it more actionable for us?
Yeah, it seems to me it's a matter of just finding another district and try to figure it out and do whatever they
Or
do.
did they just find staff to do it?
That's probably what they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the, what percentage of our student body is, in sped? Do you have that kind of round figure?
Covering at like 13-14%.
Okay.
Of that, I can definitely find out the exact percentage.
Well, I was just looking, 21% of our kids that were disciplined in elementary student misconduct were sped kids, so that's higher than their percentage. The secondary maybe is about the right thing. I mean, nothing's right about it, but yeah. I do want to make a comment about the last question that I asked about an academic connection while students are out on suspension. It felt like it was an appropriate question for this discussion. I'm wondering if it was routed to the wrong person. I mean, Mr. Baker obviously doesn't know the practices of each building, but when we ask that kind of question, should it just be routed just to some principals or something, or what?
No, I think if we have the questions, we've got to make sure we're having a communication both with data and the teacher and learning side. So it's just communication that has to happen on our side. It's not anything around, that's a we side of things, so I just have to make sure that's a more complete answer.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't need to
Go
necessarily.
ahead, Director Hoover.
I don't need to necessarily reiterate anything that folks have said, but I agree with a lot with
You're cutting out.
Is this gonna be better? Maybe?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so the one comment that I had is really just more about the data, how we're presenting the data, particularly around gender. And for some reason, this one just really hit me. That it literally just said male and female. And I think we need to recognize that there are more than that in our district. And also, and I know we'll get into it later, but it's on the same vein. Even in looking at the CEE data, it's male, female, and other. And that doesn't feel super great to be categorized as other. And so I think it would be really wonderful to really think about and working with whatever data management or systems that we're using to figure out how we can push them to have more expansive gender options in how this is presented, so that we're not erasing people.
Thank you for bringing that forward, Carmen.
Okay, anything else on the discipline data? All right, then move forward to the CE parent, student, and staff survey. Anybody have any?
I think my kind of burning question, particularly after receiving the full report, which for reference, there's about, and this is not exact, but about 4 for the district as a whole, and then about 5 or 6 per school. And they range from 20 pages, 13 pages to 30 pages. So overall, I counted there's 730 pages, and I found it wild that that was condensed into an 8-page document. And so I think what I'm so just curious about is, what was your process for determining like which of the components were the most important, and why did you choose kind of to present to us what you did, and the kind of like what story is that telling you and telling us?
So the way can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So what we do prior to doing a report is we go back and we look at what the board questions were for the prior year and the year before regarding a report. And we look at the questions that were asked. And so to me, those were items that the board would like included in a report that weren't included. And so each year, again, when we do these reports, we reflect on those. And that's kind of how, we build our reports based on the questions that we received the previous year. It is difficult to condense a 700-page report into something that's, that's a summary of that much stuff. The one issue that we looked at, which the board often brings up as an objective of the district, is our SEL work. And so that's why the first couple of pages there were from the SEL portion of the CEE survey. And then the second part were the data trends related to the 9 characteristics of highly functioning schools. That seems to me that's like a summary of a lot of the information that's in the report. And so in an effort to condense it from 700 pages to like 8 or 10, kind of like a snapshot of what the entire report contains. And then so then you come back and ask additional questions, and then we fill in the gaps with what other information we have based on that report.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for sharing that a little bit. I think what really struck me is and that makes sense. And I think what really struck me, and Director Bolichuk spoke to this earlier, I don't remember at what point, but in one of these individual reports, there was just a wild percentage of students that don't feel respected by others at the school. So that doesn't align to me with what seemed like fairly reasonable sense of belongingness. And so like that almost didn't really feel fully representative of the nuance of what's in these full reports. And again, I hear you when you say I can't even imagine having to consolidate all of that data into something that, you know, we're going to want to see. But yeah, that's, I don't know. I just wonder if there's a different, I don't know, some other way that we could do that could give us a more comprehensive understanding of what's in here.
Mhm. Well, if you have additional questions after you review all of the information, I'm happy to have a conversation, you know, with anyone that would like to discuss it.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think my question is like, what's next, right? So how is this data actually like informing planning decisions?
Right. And so I would say that the buildings, the principals have received their data for their school for this year. And they are believed that breaking it down into some usable segments that will inform their practice as they move forward in the 2022-23 school year.
I think also part of the work, which I've mentioned a little bit before, is that based on our strategic goals and our SMART goals that we are developing, that CEE will be working with the principals on aligning the information that comes out of these surveys and are specific to each one of the schools and aligning that to some of the strategic plan work that they hopefully then would give you more of that deep information that's relevant to the particular school and the principal, so that they can see those trends. I think it will help with the conversations and a couple of other things that we've already alluded to here, you know, related to task force. That sense of belongingness, like as I've mentioned before, that's really like what you're really wanting to have from students and staff and parents. That's kind of the whole point of having your strategic plan, is have that belongingness and great academic outcomes, both of those things for our students.
So I think in terms of, obviously there's a huge amount of data here, and it takes, as you're saying, there's a number of different ways to kind of look at it. So one of the ways I always kind of go through these reports is looking for the, you know, the kind of the low points, which are the areas to me that indicate that there needs to be we need to figure out some improvement, understand it more. And so, I mean, I haven't been through the whole thing, but looked at one of the summary things, and obviously you need to do that at the building level, but at a district level, you know, for the staff, some of the low ones were district administrators communicate clear vision of good instruction, district leadership communicates effectively with my school, which corresponds to the kind of the one that's low in every school is district support for improvement. So, you know, what that tells me is that we need to work, you know, the strategic plan work, the vision work, developing improvement work, you know, all that kind of stuff. Points at that one. Another one, it was interesting from the families. I try and kind of, yeah, I know these things and they do this. Sometimes they look for like differences between staff can have one perception, students have another perception, families have another perception. So the families, the lower one was my students challenged with their various coursework. You know, which is an interesting one from families, from students. The one that ended up really low, all students are held to the same behavior rules and expectations. Most students are respectful of others at school, which, you know, we talked about that in the belonging one. Another one that came from, you know, staff it's interesting, staff, struggling students receive early intervention and remediation was really low, and yet for students and families, it was pretty high. So that's an interesting question, but it's interesting when you're looking at students, that behavior standards and consistency keeps coming up, so that, to me, when you go through and look at some of these things, it kind of points out areas that you need to kind of delve in deeper to understand why it is. And I think the approach to the CE, there's obviously a ton of data here, and we probably should, I think we talked about it earlier, is we're definitely worthy of a work session to go more than just one or two things, or what was asked last year, kind of go in a little more, have a couple of other approaches. The CE group has done, I noticed over the years in looking at it, they used to just dump it at us. And now there's a lot more different tools that they have in here for looking for those variations and gaps and so forth. And so they have more sophisticated tools that I think are good. So anyway, I think we're not at this point as yet getting as much out of this as we could. And so, thinking about how to do a little better analysis and then pick out, we can't pick out a ton, but we need to focus, but a few things that we need to go in more depth and in some cases it's going to be task forces to look at it and some just more analysis. So, but anyway, there's a lot of information here that we need to kind of absorb. And also, I hear every year, okay, the building's got it, they look at it, but I never hear back, well, here's the key 2 or 3 points that we pulled out, and here's what we did, to address it. That would be really helpful as part of the CE, and that could probably be done as part of the, if we get the presentation to schools about their SIP plan. Yep. They would just come in and say, here's the data we got from CE, here's what we looked at it, here's what we did about it, that kind of stuff would be really helpful. So, any other comments on the CE data? I'm curious, Dennis, do you remember filling out your student survey?
Was it near like middle of the year or was it one of that?
Do you know how it was, Mr. Baker, do you know how it was distributed to students?
Teachers were sent a link, and then the teachers passed that link on to their students, and they performed their survey on a Chromebook.
When was that?
So the teachers were provided a link for the students, and then the teachers sent the link to the students, and the students completed the survey on their Chromebooks.
When? What time of year?
It was in the spring, in May.
Can you remind me like what the content of the survey was?
There were several different questions about discipline, perceptions of staff, academics.
So it's like a rating scale from, that's very,
Always.
very satisfied,
Oh, yeah.
neutral, not true at all, or something in there. Let's see if I can find a question from the student one. Students are, this school is doing a good job of preparing me to succeed in my life. I have a plan for what I want to do after high school. Just a whole big list of those kind of things. So you remember doing that? Okay. I don't know, do you have any sense of how your peers, does everybody take it pretty seriously?
I feel like there were some people who basically after randomly skipped the whole thing.
Yeah,
It's obviously gonna happen with every survey.
yeah,
But some were pretty honest, and I don't think anybody kind of lied about the answers, since it's pretty anonymous, so.
yeah, it's anonymous, totally
Yeah.
anonymous, yeah.
So I think it's safe to say that most people answered honestly, and we can kind of look back and what is that on survey.
Good, yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm just curious, the student experience. Do you guys, students remember filling out this survey? Yeah. You think it was asking you questions that were helpful? I mean, questions that you care about, questions that you would want to let us know how things are going?
The majority of the people who check in from my class, they kind of just put the closest answer and just went down and down and down.
Yeah,
But I know a handful of students that did take it seriously, including myself, who answered honestly to the best of their ability. And if they weren't quite sure, we need to face like signature.
yeah.
They were kind of obscure questions sometimes.
Yeah, some of the questions were better than others. And do you think there was some area of questioning that was missing that you wish? Is there a question there that you would have liked to have seen on that wasn't maybe, or in a particular area that wasn't covered?
I don't know if we'll do that now.
Okay,
Mr. Baker, I'm wondering, is there a place to zero in on this, the students feeling safe at school? If that would be, one of the data points that we might want to pull out.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that.
Thank you.
yeah, a couple of the students believe this school is a safe place. I feel safe in the school. Okay, I guess this, so what the students are asked is, I feel safe at this school. Families are asked, my students feel safe at this school. Staff is asked, students believe this school is a safe place.
Okay.
And there was most, yeah, the staff rated was a little lower, students were a little higher, but
And I remember that as we were going to survey, it was pretty long and like.
yeah,
So that lost a lot of the people's attention, so if it's an option, a viable option, maybe split it up into shorter surveys, focus on different areas. For what it already is, then I feel like that would keep the attention a little bit longer.
yeah, that's what you found. Okay. So for the presentations, so I need a motion to approve the human resources staffing report.
So, second,
So moved and seconded that we approve the human resources staffing report. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. The staffing report is approved. The next one is approval of donation cabbage family trust. Need a motion to approve.
So moved.
second,
So moved and seconded. Any questions, comments on this one? This is a donation from the Cabbage family that's been coming for a couple of years now. And we certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great.
Provides a scholarship for our students.
Yep.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The donation is approved, and now we have, at the end of our meeting, we also allow for any public comments. That anybody wants to make at this point, either in person or online. Seeing none in the room, do we have any online? Going once. Going twice.
Well, I would say something.
Okay, please, would you identify yourself and just,
My name is George Willard, I'm based at, I came down here to support Maeve. I'd like to express my gratitude to this board and this district for, putting their needs front. Thank you.
thank you,
thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Could use a motion to an executive session, so entertain a motion to adjourn,
So moved.
Second.
and moved and seconded that we adjourn, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No, the meeting is adjourned, thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.